Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. We're going to take a few minutes just to let one or two stragglers jump in, but it looks like we've got a pretty good attendance on this first topic of a four-part series we're running, which you can see on the screen, called Controlling the Sprawl of AI. While we're waiting, for those of you that are listening, and I'll put a reminder at the back end of the conversation, this four-part series was derived from conversations our CISOs have been having with our clients to drive what the agenda is. Today is the controlling the sprawl of AI. Next, coming up mid-July, is properly sizing cybersecurity insurance. Following that is the case for managed SOC. And finally, the end of July is third-party vendor risk. So if you haven't seen those, as part of the follow-up from this particular webinar, we'll be sending out a reminder for those other sessions that you can join at any time. So why don't we get started to honor the fact that the good students that got in on time, if not early. So again, thank you for joining. My name is Chris Yule. I'm the VP of Sales and Strategy for CyberSecOps. Today, as I mentioned, the topic is controlling the sprawl of AI, and the speaker that we've brought forward is one of our senior CISOs. I'm going to let Tom introduce himself to give you a little bit of a background on what he is all about, what he brings to the table, and the perspective that he has, as well as the rest of our team, on this particular area, which we know is a concern for all. Tom, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Chris. So my name is Tom Guadagno. I have been in the cybersecurity uh, arena for, since well, let's not date myself. Let's just say more than 30 years. I have followed along and been learning ever since as a CISO, as a vCISO, as a CIO. I've been in this in many different aspects. And now the latest, of course, is AI. So we do everything we can here to learn as much as we can, studying the compliance frameworks and learning everything we can to keep our clients safe. So a few things we'll talk about today, why shadow AI matters now, the control playbook, and then at the end here, we'll have a live Q&A and some next steps. Before we do that, if you would drop the name of one AI tool that you or your team used this week. No judgment, easy, no wrong answer, opener. Just, if you would be so kind and give us an idea of what kind of tools you're all using. So the average is 49% of your team is using AI and you don't know about it. So the regulators are done waiting. The frameworks are being updated and built. We've already got NIST, AI, RMF. There's also an ISO standard now. These things are going to keep coming out and the requirements are going to keep increasing. So how a free AI query becomes a denied insurance claims. The data goes in, no record exists, so no policy, no logging, no protection of the data. The organization can't show what happened. And then the question comes, the insurer, regulator, client asked what governance was in place. The failure is rarely the breach itself, it's the absence of a governance record when the issuer, regulator, or client comes asking. So you really need to have that record of logging and everything that's going on in your environment and the government policies. You can't govern what you can't see. And most of the AI in your organization is invisible. So this goes back to the 49% using unapproved AI tools. If you don't have policies in place, if you don't have governance in place, then you're not going to be able to control the sprawl of it. And every day they're using it more and more, and this number keeps going up. Do you know what your employees are using? Do you know what tools they're using? and how they're being used. Do you know the risks? Do they know the risks? And what we found is that they don't. Most people don't understand the risks involved with AI. We make the assumption that, hey, it must be safe. You know, it's a big company. And that is not the case. 4 ways that shadow AI hurts you. Data leakage. So either your source code, your personal information, deal terms, paste it into public models. Those things get added to the next training of that model, and now they become part of the training if you're not aware of the safeguards. The data retention, how long is that company going to retain your data? What if they get breached? Compliance exposure. So you have no DPA, no records of processing, no consent trail, decision integrity. So, AI hallucinates. It makes stuff up. They all do it. There's some are better than others, but you always have to review and check the work because you could be sending out data that is absolutely, or information that's absolutely not true. It is very capable of doing that and does do it regularly. And then unmanaged vendor risk. So without vetting out the vendors that you're using for the AI tools, whether it's Anthropic, whether it's OpenAI, or whoever you're using, making sure that they have the safeguards in place and that they have them available to you to use to keep your data safe and the information that you're putting up into these systems and tools.
I think it's important to share too that these four areas are both validated from our customers, our CIOs and CISOs that we work with, but also analytic data that's been shared through lots of different sources. The thing that Tom pointed out that I think is equally important is right now there are no controls on who can go into what AI platform, if not multiple platforms, and ask whatever question and potentially move whatever AI data intentionally or unintentionally, and we all know it's mostly unintentionally, and then that gets shared over and over and over again. So realistically, this issue of how it hurts you is probably as open door a policy to exposing everything that you're chartered to protect to such an extreme level. It's one of the reasons that this became the predominant topic for the webinar series, and also we were asked to do it again after the summer months are over, just in case we miss some people, in this particular go around.
Yep, all very true. So the risks hiding in a single prompt, again, goes back to data retention. Prompts and uploads are stored on the provider servers, often indefinitely outside of your control and reachable by their staff or a subpoena. Model training on free tiers, your data may train the vendor models, and confidential terms or code can resurface in someone else's output. That applies to personal information, that applies to HIPAA information. All those things could literally make it into the next training session that somebody could be asking a question about, and it becomes a valid answer to the AI model. So that's something that most people are not aware of. And the biggest safeguard for this, most companies offer a business tier or an enterprise tier. Most of those by default will not train on your data, but then you still have to worry about the data retention. And then no contractual protection, no DPA, no confidentiality terms, no breach notification duty. So if data is exposed, you have neither legal recourse or a defensible position. And then, where we started today too, talking about no audit trail. With no logging, you can't show the regulators, insurers, or clients what was shared, turning an incident into an unprovable, uninsurable incident. So it is very important to know what's happening in your environment and to have some governance in place. And the regulatory clock is running. Phased obligations are now in force. Risk classification, transparency, and governance duties with extraterritorial reach. It requires to classify each AI use case and document high-risk systems. The expected baseline, govern, map, measure, and manage what auditors and boards now ask you to map. So automated decisions in scope. Profiling and ADM rules expand across US states. Opt-outs and assessments required. and AI controls at renewal. Questionnaires now ask about AI use and governance. Gaps can mean exclusions or denied claims. So, if you are in a regulated environment, the frameworks that you're required to follow, such as NIST or HIPAA, they're all starting to require AI controls to be in place, and they need to be there. So this is no longer becoming optional, and your insurance company is requiring it. Every insurance questionnaire is going to ask you questions about AI, and if you're not following the governance and the requirements that they have, you're going to end up with an unpayable claim. So 3 moves in order. Number one, discover. See what's actually in use before you write a single rule. Inventory AI tools and embedded features, map data flows and identities, and rank data by sensitivity. Number two, govern. Set clear, usable rules mapped to a recognized framework. Acceptable use and approved tool list, map controls to NIST, AI, RMF, name owners, and an exception path. So putting those policies in place to govern is very important in making sure that they are adhered to. And then control, enforce, and monitor. So policy without enforcement is just a memo. Guardrails at the data and identity layer, log usage for audit and insurer evidence, and train people on the safe path. You know, so in your next 30 days, perform a directive 50 question AI assessment. Collect shadow IT logs files across your stack. And with that, a lot of the tools out there can detect it. There's no good single tool that detects them all at this point, but you can look at firewall logs. You can look at Microsoft 365 logs. Look at the places you have that you can look. Even DNS logs. If your IT can provide that for you. Collect those logs and start seeing where are people going, what are they actually using. Review the AI questions on your cyber renewal. So your insurance, you've got to make sure that cyber insurance renewal, you're answering those questions accurately. If you want that coverage, make sure that you're doing and answering the questions accurately. And then mapping your controls to something like the NIST AI RMF, which is a pretty standard framework right now. It was one of the first ones to come out, but there are more coming. And publish an acceptable use policy and approved tools list. Again, go into the governance. You've got to tell your people, you've got to have your employees know what the boundaries are, what kind of information they're sending up, what is not allowed to be sent up to an AI. And then brief leadership with 1 page. Here's what we found, and here is what we are doing, and making sure that everyone is on the same page.
So one of the things that we were asked over and over again when we ran our summer series last year was to try to continue to put really actionable items and outcomes on there. I know that's a word that we keep hearing over and over again, which is why we have this little thing about screenshot this particular slide. We've taken the time in partnership with our GRC partners to put in that 50 question questionnaire and map it to those controls. And I know Tom's going to give you some more information on that. So just by going through the interview process and answering the questions, you're going to automatically have some of that and then be able to compare what it's supposed to be then compared to what you are doing. And we have step-by-step processes to sit down and help an organization find their way through this process. And what's really great, if in fact we stay on pace, within that 30 to 45 days, you will have a view of where you are and a view of where you would want to be able to evangelize that within your organization to get the assistance and the investment to sit down and put those guardrails in place.
Yeah, that's all very good, Chris. That's good stuff. If you look across all 5 of these, all 6 of these here, the one thing that I can tell you is all this takes is a little bit of time right now, and this time can save you a lot of money, a lot of headaches. It can save your company's reputation. It is so important to keep all of this, at the forefront as we move more and more every day into AI, and the tools are being used more and more, and employees are bringing their free or their consumer accounts, their AI accounts, into the organization and using them on the computers, and you don't even know it. You don't know that your company's data is being put out there. You don't know that it can be trained, in the next round, and then your company's information, stuff that is proprietary or secret that you do not want coming out, can be in the next round of training, which means go into the AI, ask it a question, and it can give that information. So these are all very important and things that you need to set aside the time to accomplish these things. Ask one more question here. How confident are you that you know every AI tool your employees use? So, if it's very incompetent, put a one in the chat. If you're very confident that you know, put a five in the chat. Just very curious to see, where you all stand. It is, again, no judgment here. Um, Most companies are probably closer to a one. Few companies realize the impact and the dangers of the AI. So score yourself against the NIST AI RMF. So you don't need a 100-question audit to begin. A short, structured assessment mapped to the framework's core functions shows where the gaps are and gives leadership a baseline to track. It reveals your biggest exposures fast. It speaks the language auditors, insurers use, gives you a score to improve against. So in NIST, you're going to have questions that answer the questions: who is accountable for AI in our organization? And do we have a policy and an inventory of where it is used? Do we know what data each AI system touches and the risks of how and where it's actually used? Can we monitor AI use, evaluate its risks over time, and respond when something goes wrong? So just some examples of what this looks like for AI governance and compliance assessments. Um, you know, is your organization's use of AI secure, compliant, and under control? AI use and development policies. Again, have your organization established formal AI usage and development policies that define acceptable use, risk thresholds, and oversight responsibilities.
Yeah,
And that's
these
all under
are
NIST and ISO.
Yeah, these are four questions that were pulled out of the 50, but also to reflect not just the type of questions that are in there, but also that cross-referencing, as Tom pointed out, on the actual controls and subcontrols. So they are very much thought-provoking, but also somewhat subjective at times on this is what you're feeling as opposed to what you can prove. But there's a combination of them to be able to give that perspective. And then conjoined with what we're doing on the analytics side to follow is where you'll sit down and get that completely clear view of exactly how exposed or how at risk is your organization, and exactly then working towards the remediation steps on it.
Right, right. So, moving on to governance roles and review. Are the roles, responsibilities for AI governance defined and reviewed regularly? Pre-deployment assessment. Do procedures exist to evaluate AI systems before deployment, including environmental, ethical, and operational impact assessments? And then monitoring and drift detection. Are monitoring mechanisms in place to detect abnormal model behavior or drift that can indicate security compromise? These are just four questions, but they're not hard to answer. It'll help you understand where you are. Are you secure? Are you doing anything to secure yourselves? And it also will give you a good indication of what you need to do. So, four sources, 80% of the picture. DNS tells you who is reaching an AI service. That's one place you can get the information from, looking at your DNS query logs. OAuth tells you who gave one corporate data. The audit log tells you how data leaves. Endpoint inventory catches what bypasses the network. Together they can answer who, what, where, how with no overlap. The minimum set that still tells a complete story. So all of these together are really need to be combined to figure out what is going on your network at this point until there's a tool out there that can reliably detect AI, because it changes every day. I can tell you, when some of these vendors are releasing new versions of their chats almost every day. They're updating them and adding new features. and that is always changing in your environment. So when you detect one, if you don't have continuous monitoring or some way to keep going back to check, it's always changing. So again, the AI assessment, qualitative and quantitative, capture what your organization believes and intends. Logs will quantify what is actually happening. The value to a CISO is in the delta, where the confident self-reported answer is contradicted by a log evidence. The assessment is found unmanaged inherent risk. So questionnaire theme. We have an AI approved tool. There's an AI usage policy. DNS hits AI domains. It shows shadow app discovery. And then policy exists on paper, but unsanctioned tools are active in use. Well, that would be a risk that an insurer or an auditor would not be happy with. That is a risk to your business and your reputation. AI tools are not connected to corporate accounts. So if they've got private accounts, very dangerous. Corporate identity already authorizes AI apps. Again, if that information is getting out there, it can and will be used. And when you talk about who uses this data and who searches it, there are threat actors searching every industry and every company looking for a way in, looking for a way to compromise. These are all very important items that you need to have in place. The questionnaire theme, sensitive data is not shared with AI services. The DLP policy hits large posts to AI endpoints, and then personal information or intellectual property is leaving for AI endpoints. AI use is limited to a few sanctioned teams. DNS, proxy attribution by user or department. Usage is broad and decentralized, not contained. And we monitor and can detect AI usage. The SIM data quality pre-checks. Required feeds are missing or stale, blind to AI use. So all of these risks surfaced by a mismatch are things that you need to be watching for and making sure that these holes are plugged. So let's find your shadow AI before someone else does, because they certainly will. And, Chris, I'll hand that back to you.
Yeah, we
Well,
had a couple questions come in, Tom, so maybe you can answer. We got a couple minutes left. So I did mention the 30 to 45 days. So the question is, do you feel like if in fact they have the time to sit down and answer the questions, and if they can find, if you go back to that slide that had the four areas of log files, if they had all that together, do you think a 30 to 45 day time frame is reasonable to sit down and actually work with a customer to gather the information, perform the interview, analyze the results, and give them back an answer or give them back a report?
yeah, I think 45 days is reasonable. That shouldn't be a problem. And again, it really depends on your own time frame and how much time you're going to dedicate to it. If you're going to have the resources to answer the questions, to pull the logs, once that's all gathered up, then the analysis can begin. And there are tools that can assist with that. So I think, if you'd said 45 days, I think that's probably a pretty good number for most companies, especially with an initial assessment.
Okay. And the second question was around kind of remediation or guardrails we keep talking about. So there was a question about what kinds of things are typical that they might see, not forecasting that this is an answer for everybody, but they were kind of wondering like, well, what can be done? Like if I identify these particulars, my situation is Wild West, too many people using too many things, no one's watching the store. What are some of the ways to go about putting some guardrails in place? And what would those be? What would those look like?
Well, there's a couple of things there to start with. One is you need to have a policy that lets everyone know what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And it really starts from there. So then you, of course, detecting what is in place, what is being used, and then making sure that people are following the rules. There's a limited amount of tools out there that you can use to stop that from happening. But the biggest risk that you have with any of this data is not using a business account. You know, they all have either business level accounts or enterprise accounts. And the difference between the two is the data retention and the training. With a business account, there's no training. So making sure that everyone there is providing it, if they're going to use AI tools, you need to vet which ones are secure, which ones will work best for your organization, and then let them use an approved tool. And if it's helping their job, then you really need to have either a business account for them or an enterprise account for them, depending on the size and scope of what you need. Where those things, training doesn't happen on business accounts, but the retention can often be negotiated so that you could limit how long they hang on to your data.
Okay. I know the other way that we've seen for some of our customers is leveraging an enterprise browser. Do you want to mention just a few words about that in being able to control what information is actually being shared or not?
Yeah, there are browsers out there that can watch the data. So if you copy a credit card number or a social security number into your browser, that it will absolutely not allow it, or it will blank it out so it cannot be copied. There are tools out there that can handle that. You know,
Okay.
that falls under the DLP, the digital loss prevention, and they are out there.
All right. To respect everybody's time, we finished about 4 minutes early, so that's great news. You will get a copy of the deck that Tom reviewed. You'll get a recording of the transcript. Inside of that also will just be a reminder of the other three sessions that are coming up. And as I mentioned, there were case for managed SOC, properly sizing cybersecurity insurance, and third-party vendor risk. Inside of the email, you can respond if you'd like this to go from an educational conversation to a conversation about helping you through this process and what it would take to perform the assessment and gather the log files. So we do really appreciate your time, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you in one of the next webinars coming up. If we don't talk to you, have a great summer, and thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you, everyone.